Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Raymore City Council work session for Monday, May the 17th, 2021. Everyone is in attendance tonight from the City Council. We have two items on the agenda tonight. I do have one under other to discuss with you, but under item A is probably the highest priority issue, and that is the upcoming Ward 1 seat vacancy with Mr. Jacobson leaving the council. So I will turn it over to Mr. Fearborn to outline that process.
Thank you, sir. In the history of this occurring with the council, there had been two occasions, and I perhaps gave the mayor some erroneous information based on these two occasions. I had indicated originally to the mayor that the council tonight has one of two options available to them. One, you can leave the seat vacant until the next general municipal election next April of 2022, or you can follow the procedures as outlined in the charter and the code for filling that vacant seat. In the history of this occurring, there have been two occasions where the seat was actually left unfilled until the next general municipal election, and that was because it was so close to the next general municipal election that the time frame as outlined here would have actually conflicted with the election. People had already filed, et cetera, et cetera. Every other case, and you will note as you read through both section 3, which is the first page of the packet you have in front of you, as well as the code, which is page 2, it is not optional language. It is you shall fill the seat if there's not that calendar conflict associated. So that gives the council only one option in this case, and that is to actually fill the seat by the process as outlined within the code, which is page 2 in your packet. Page 3 of your packet, I give a recommended preliminary timeline for all of this to occur. Page 4 of the packet actually puts that timeline onto the calendar itself, with the July date being the next date. Just to quickly run through that, tonight we're at the work session to give us direction on how to proceed. May 31st would be the final day for Councilmember Jacobson's seat being filled. That would mean that the following Thursday, we would put out the 14-day public notice in the paper for the vacancy to be filled. June 17th at 5 p.m. would be the closing date for those applications. June 18th, the following Friday, we would put out on our website a public notice of the persons who have applied and the council meeting date for interviews and public input. That is, of course, not an official posting. The following Thursday, on June 24th, notice of the special council meeting to interview qualified candidates would go out. June 28th would then be the interview of those candidates, the qualified candidates who had applied. If the council, then the council has two options available to them that night. Following the interviews, if the council determines that none of the candidates were qualified, or you can't come to a majority vote on the candidates, you can then post it again and go through the whole process again for new candidates. If the council does find one of the candidates qualified and that candidate receives a majority of the council votes, then on July 12th, as the first item of business prior to presentations and awards, that new council member would be sworn in, take their seat. Presentations and awards would be to honor Councilmember Jacobson for his service, and he has promised to come back for that, so we're not looking at an empty seat. And item 3, as the first order of new business, because the mayor pro tem seat would be empty just like we do in the past, the first order of new business would be for the council to pick a new mayor pro tem. Again, you see those in the calendar form on the next page. Provide you all with the initial draft of the public notice that would go out announcing this seat's vacancy. And behind that is the application for City of Raymore council member that you all are familiar with. This same application is used for this particular process. And then The last item is actually, the mayor has indicated that he will not be here on the 28th for the interviews to take place. The interviews are a vote of the council, just like any other vote of the council. The mayor does not actually have a vote in that particular process. So what I outlined for you all is how the council, which you all have added just recently with the most recent code change, is picking a presiding officer, because we would be under the circumstance of no mayor pro tem, no mayor. I would suggest to the council that at the first work session in June, you all go through the process of deciding on a presiding officer for the special meeting, which would take the place of the work session on the 28th. So that concludes staff report on this particular item, sir. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, you covered what my question was going to be on how we would choose a leader for that particular meeting. So I appreciate you adding that in there. Anybody have, yes, Ms. Abdelgawad.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. I'm wondering, why wouldn't we just go ahead and appoint a mayor pro tem once Mr. Jacobson leaves, rather than waiting until we have the new council member? It's most likely not going to be that new council member, so could we just go ahead and appoint a mayor pro tem in June rather than waiting until July?
The only reason I recommend this particular process is because it would be unusual to pick a mayor pro tem, not necessarily without having all the council seats and all of the council having the opportunity to vote on that particular individual. Even though it would probably not be the new individual, it would be most appropriate. It wouldn't deter you from doing that ahead of time, but it would be most appropriate if the entire council were voting on a mayor pro tem.
Sure, go ahead.
I understand what you're saying, most appropriate for all of us to choose, but on the other hand, I guess I'm thinking, so if something happened to happen to the mayor during that month, we're going a whole month without a mayor pro tem. So other than just the appropriateness of having every single one of us vote, it seems more efficient, in my opinion, to just go ahead and choose a mayor pro tem in June rather than going that month having to choose that presiding officer, et cetera. Just my opinion.
And again, it was for just this particular reason that we added to the code, picking a presiding officer. The mayor would only be absent for one of the meetings, but it is entirely up to the council if you want to go ahead and pick a mayor pro tem on the 7 votes.
Mr. Burke?
Thank you, Your Honor. So it's not addressed in the charter on, as far as filling the mayor pro tem position? Is it?
So it's actually addressed in the code, and it is.
So we do have these options that you're.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Holman?
Thank you, sir. I would agree with Councilmember Abdelgawad's comment as far as efficiency. I would agree that would make the most sense. However, I think the counter argument would be that Ward 1 does not get to be as involved in the selection of the process of mayor pro tem, and therefore I would have to support the position of waiting. Even though I agree with you, I don't think it's as an efficient process. I trust that we can get through a month, that the mayor will be here, and if he's not, that we can elect someone to fill as presiding officer until we elect a mayor pro tem of the 8 of us.
Yeah, I'm just going on vacation. I'm not going into surgery. So.
Planning to, I guess, maybe, in my family, we've
None
had
of
some
you are
emergencies
planning to.
lately, so I'm like, we need to be prepared for an emergency.
Yes, sir.
It looks like that the presiding officer situation could come about multiple times a year at any time that we just happen to have the situation occur, and each time it would be a different vote. Would this be, is there any precedence to have a presiding officer have that job for longer than one meeting, as it mentions kind of in this? Maybe I need to see the full outline of it, but.
Well, that is the entirety of the code
Okay.
that you see on that
All right.
last page.
The language does contemplate multiple individuals.
And what it actually contemplates is there's a quorum of the council here, the meeting is about to take place, the mayor and the mayor pro tem cannot be present, so it allows you to pick. Before that, there was no way for the council to even pick. It allows you to pick a presiding officer to oversee the meeting because a quorum of the council is present. Because we have the luxury of knowing ahead of time that there will be no mayor or mayor pro tem, the council can take care of that 2 weeks in advance and have it pushed off the table so we know who's going to be. And of course, the presiding officer still has a vote. All they're doing is opening and closing the meeting.
Thank you.
Mr. Holman?
So I have a question. I think we've kind of made a little bit of an assumption. I know we've done this at least once or twice since I've been on the council. We could also elect a presiding officer for the term until the mayor pro tem was selected. Isn't that correct? So if we selected someone, that person, we could say that person will be our presiding officer should the mayor not be present until a mayor pro tem is selected by the council. Is that correct?
As you see, the code is silent to that.
Yes, sir.
So yes, I think the legal interpretation would be yes.
Yeah, the reference specifically is the next regular either to serve over the meeting or until the next regular municipal election. So you've got your code section of 110.090. I see one of the two options. It would be worthwhile to consider whether or not additional to the code would make sense in order to say for however meetings we knew there were going to be an absence.
And I would point out on the calendar, the special meeting is on the 28th. There is no meeting on July 5th because that is when we celebrate the holiday. So that first work session, there will be no meeting. The next meeting, we would actually be picking a mayor pro tem. And barring any sort of an emergency, I'm sure the mayor is still planning on being at that one.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and knock for Micah that there's no curse here.
Mr. Burke?
Thank you. One last thing. I'm currently, unless I change my plans with my family, going to be out of town on the 28th for that week. I could go up Tuesday night. I was actually going to go for the entire week for one time, but I could just do like I've always done. It's one of those things I'd kind of like to wait and find out how many applications there are. If there's multiples, then I would probably try to be here. If there was only one or two, it might be a different situation. Just for information for the rest of you.
There's always the possibility of having a special meeting as well, if the council would want to consider that.
Well, even on the 28th, it has to be declared a special meeting. It's not a work session, sir. So at any point in time that you would be just doing this, it's going to have to be posted as a special meeting.
Right. Right. That was my point. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Belgawad.
Changing the topic just slightly, I noticed that it says that we have to at least ask these two questions on the application. I know from my experience looking at these applications before, those two questions don't really give you a whole lot of information about the person. And I know we have a chance to do the interview, but I'm wondering if any other council members would be interested in maybe adding a couple other questions to the application, such as maybe to get an idea of what someone might know about what's happening in the city or topics that might come before the council, kind of the hot topics, just asking them to speak to what are some important topics that you might see come before the council. What do you know about those things? Or even something about teamwork. I think that's an important thing maybe to hear someone speak to, describe your experience and ideas on teamwork as a member of a governing body. Just some suggestions for maybe some additional questions on that application.
And the code does say at least, as the council member pointed out, that if the council wanted other questions, we can most certainly do that. if you wanted to think about those questions for a week, we could put onto staff reports a request of the council next week if you have any of those to come forward to us.
Anyone else? Yes.
If
Do you have
the
any
coun-
more?
If the council is amenable, I'll put that onto staff reports next week, just to ask if the council has any additional questions they'd like.
Okay.
Give you that time to think
That'll
about it. Perfect.
Everybody good with that? All right. Okay. Anything else on this topic before we move on? Okay, a good timeline. Thank you, Jim, for putting that together. Again, we've got time. We can discuss whether or not we wish to have a special meeting to avoid any absences in the event that we wish to push forward on that. So we will, since the 14-day public notice actually goes out on the 3rd, so we should have applications in by the 17th. If there was a desire for this group to have a special meeting at some point during the week prior to the June 28th deadline, or June 28th meeting, work session, that way it'd be work session rather than an actual special meeting. I mean, we can have them made, we just got to post them up. I mean, that's just kind of the way we can do that, can't we? Can we have a special meeting other than on a Monday night?
Oh, absolutely, sir. We just need to have time to post it for the public, because the process allows for, and it's really specific, the process allows for citizens to come up and give testimony if they are citizens from Ward 1. It is the citizens that would be served by this seat, so we have to give enough leeway within the posting, which we thought if we post on a Thursday for a Monday, the other option that the council has available to them is you meet on July 5th, which pushes everything back 1 week.
Yeah, I don't think I get in till 7 o'clock that evening, though. So I'd be pushing it to get here. Push it to the 5th?
I would be out of town on the 5th.
Oh, you'll be out of town on the 5th. Is anybody in town on a Saturday? I mean, we can do this thing on a Saturday too, and that gives everybody an opportunity to come up. I know it makes you guys work overtime, but, I mean, you're doing it in the evening anyway. So we could come up on like a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, something like that. I mean, it might be easier for even the candidates to get here if they're still working. Make it easier for everybody else.
The only Saturday in June I'm available is the 19th.
Okay. Interviews in public. Okay, well, guess not. All right, well, we'll stay with the timeline then. Looks like it's going to work out the best.
Very good, sir.
Okay. Anything else on the topic? If not, we'll move on to the next item, which is the utility billing dates. Mr. Fearborn.
Thank you, sir. I am going to, I'll give a prelude here. The council will remember that what seems like a long time ago because of COVID, we changed out all of our meters with the new metering system, state of the art. And one of the things that I had discussed with the council when we were making the recommendations for that is that after we got through the initial rush of putting those meters in and the time frames that were associated with that, that we would be changing over to a simplistic 1 day a month. Happens with, right now we have 4 zones, 2 different billing dates, 2 different shut off, turn on dates. It's messy to say the least, but it worked for the old system. With the new system, we press a button and everybody gets billed. So I informed the council way back when that we would eventually be going with 1 billing date. Now that we're through COVID and all of the meters have been changed out and all of the different billing times associated with meters being changed out. It seems like a very, very good time to go ahead and get to that one billing date, and it's pretty simplistic. We're actually going to be informing the public of exactly how that's going to work. In the Raymore review, you have a copy of that in front of you. Pretty easy this time compared to when we were putting in a new meter and there was a swing between 2 weeks and 7 weeks on a bill. This one's much more simplistic than that, but I wanted Ms. Williams to have the opportunity to outline exactly what's going to happen. Then again, it's going to be in the Raymore review. We're going to be putting it out on the website. We're going to be putting it out with a lot of social media so everybody knows. So with that, I'll kind of turn the details over to Ms. Williams.
Thank you, sir. The one thing I might add, because Ms. Boyd would appreciate this, she does do a little bit more than push a button to bill. So I'm just going to defend her with that. When we bill in June, we're going to go to a one billing date, one due date, and one shut-off date. We actually chose that month because right now Amy's actually in the process of updating everyone's winter averages. So that same bill will have the winter average updates, kind of just to minimize our customer service, like the amount of phone calls just to be lumped all in 1 month. And the utility billing department, like Mr. Fairborn said, we do have what we call zones. There are 4 of them. Zones 1 and 2 currently have a due date on the 7th of the month. Zones 3 and 4 have a due date of the 11th of the month. Currently, we read zones 1 and 2 on the 18th of each month. So actually, Amy she can go on the 18th and she can just tell Census to pull all the meter reads for that date, and then she imports them into Encode to prepare billing. And then for zones 3 and 4, we pull those reads on the 22nd of every month. When we go to one billing date, we're going to go and we're going to read all the meters on the 20th of each month. Just, it seemed like the most simplistic way to do it. In our transition month, which is going to be June, the residents in zone 1 and 2 will see a slightly longer billing period by 2 days. Zones 3 and 4 will have a shorter billing cycle just by 2 days as well. It can make their bill fluctuate just a few dollars. I did a calculation based on what our average is for a month, and it could be about $3.38 or so up or down. So they shouldn't see a huge amount. That's just for average customers. We chose to move the residents with the due date of the 7th to be the same as zones 3 or 4 so that no one will have a due date or disconnection date that's sooner than what they currently have. So nobody will have any surprises. Going forward, every resident or every customer meter will be read on the 20th of the month. We'll bill the entire city each month on or around the 12th of the month, depending on where the weekends fall. We can't bill before the 11th because that will be the due date. So the due date will be the 11th of the month for all customers. And then subject to disconnection after 10 days late after the 11th. Disconnection is always going to be on the Wednesday following a 10-day grace period. And that concludes staff report.
Thanks, Lisa. Yep, Mr. Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question, if you're on auto paid, will that automatically update and change the due date on that? Do you have to do anything or change anything?
If you're on auto pay and we control it with a banking account, we will be moving those. We will draft those for the 11th due date. If you're on an auto pay, all credit card auto pays are managed by the individual on their Raymore.com account, so they would have to change their auto pay to change it from the 7th if they currently have it the 7th to the 11th.
U.S. Yes, Mr. Berenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Williams, thank you for the presentation. Just 2 quick questions on shutoffs. Will there be any sort of a grace period during this transition time for shutoffs? I know when we did the meter switch out, there were quite a few shutoffs for a while there. So any grace period for that? And roughly, just curious, how many shutoffs do we average a month during normal times?
This last month, we actually had a very low number. We had about 26 each time. So 26 for zones 1 and 2 and around 24 to 26 for zones 3 and 4. We are not anticipating a grace period because nothing's gonna be shorter for anyone. So it would hit the end of, I don't have the dates in front of me, but it'll hit the end of July. We'll have our disconnect notices, all of our phone call reminder calls that go out. But since we're moving zones 1 and 2 to a later due date, I don't anticipate them being caught off guard for any reason.
All right, thank you. My only thought was, some people may have a higher bill than what they're used to. Some people on a fixed income. That was my only concern with that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Is that it?
That's it for this item, sir.
Okay. There's no further questions. We'll move on to other. So, Mr. Feuerborn and I have had a conversation with the mask mandates in other areas being relieved and even kind of relaxing a little bit more in our area. What's the desire to move back to the dais? Everybody good to go? Yeah. You want the petitions to stay in place? There's there's actually 6 or 7 extra ones out there. With the ones that are in place, we'd need one more. But I don't know
If we
need
can
her
keep
to-
one between us, he spits sometimes.
Everybody good? Okay, so next regular scheduled meeting, we'll all be back in our usual spots.
Next Monday night, sir, Mr. Mayberry will be thrilled to move all the computer stuff one
Okay.
last time.
Excellent. All right. That's all I had. Anybody else have anything? Yes, Mr. Circo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, a few weeks ago, I, of course, sent an email to Mr. Feuerborn and the mayor. I will be out of town next Monday, so everybody knows, but I already notified them weeks ago. So just kind of reiterating that to them and everybody, I will not be here next week. And I'm assuming the holiday week, we will not be here on the 31st.
That's correct, sir.
Okay.
All right. If there's nothing else, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. See, Dale, it was the work session where you get to declare the meeting over.